Hey guys, we're back. This time we're taking a look at another fan-made faction for Star Trek Ascendancy. This time around it's the Orion Syndicate, and we'll get right down and take a look. First thing to look at are these cool miniatures that Frank designed for the faction, and the color really doesn't let the detail come through there. You can see it a little bit there, but the only thing I would like to do is scale them down a little. They're slightly large compared to some of the other factions, but that's just me. Same thing with the slider tokens. They're just slightly large. Could be used to scale down a little bit, so I might try doing those again just to see. But awesome to have models for them. On our control panel here, on my control panel here, this was a beta version unfortunately, and I got some wrinkles in here, so probably going to print another one of these. It was an experiment to get the laminate on there, and it failed. So you have to excuse that for now. But on this side we have our contraband, which is during the build phase the Orions can exchange contraband collected for on their command console for resources. In the middle here is our exchange table. Two ships from the same faction give you one production. Two ships from two different factions give you two production. Two ships from different factions can also give you two research, or four ships from different factions can give you culture. That one's a little harder to pull off. And on the other side we have corruption. A hostile rival can move into or through sectors containing Orion ships by paying an Orion player one resource per Orion ship. The Orion may accept a lower payment if they want. So they can basically buy you off to transport through your system where normally they can't without your permission. The contraband thing goes with our starting advancement, which are tractor beams. Also gives you an additional command, which is nice. But at the end of each combat round where you participate, you may take one destroyed rival ship as contraband, forward or immune, and then you put those on your dashboard, and then you can spend those during the build phase for the various things that are listed on there. Before we get into the other advancements, look at the trade agreements. Orions have some interesting trade agreements. The first one here is for research, and it says at the bottom that you can trade these away, and betrayal doesn't apply to single ships. So you can basically attack them with a single ship and it doesn't count as a betrayal. Getting the research out of there is cool. You have a two production, which is pretty much the same as everybody else, but again, the you can trade these away, and the betrayal does not apply to single ships. And then the most interesting one is the culture, and this one again can be traded away, and betrayal does not apply to single ships. But this one down here is the important part here. You place a slave girl when culture is generated. So whenever someone gains culture through this, you put one of these little slave girl models. And another one of Frank's awesome designs. They came out really well in an FDM printer even. You end up placing those slave girls on your on the planets where people are gaining culture from having this trade agreement. And then they give you bonuses on some of your other advancements as well. Onto our fleets. And I think the Orions are unique in the aspect that all of their fleets have abilities. All the flip sides have abilities too. So number one, you have a 4-ship fleet here for the Smuggler Wing. When this fleet takes contraband, roll a die. On a 1, 2, or 3, you get a production. On a 4 or 5, you take a research. On a 6, you take a culture. So basically they get an additional bonus in addition to the contraband you collect. Then on the flip side, we have a 5-ship fleet flanking wing. When this fleet exits warp, each ship may make a separate impulse move without issuing a command. So basically you can split up the fleet and they can spread out. I really like the Smuggler Wing though. For number 2, we have the Interceptor Fleet, which is 6 ships. At any time will it warp if a ship of any faction exits warp in a sector within warp range of this fleet without placing new space lanes. This fleet may immediately exit warp in that sector and initiate space battle without exhausting commands. That one's kind of cool, and you can even do it on other people's turns, obviously, which is entertaining. Then our other 2 is a Buccaneer Wing. It's a 4-ship fleet. If this fleet occupies a rival or independent system during resource generation, the system generates resources as if it was under your control. This one gets a lot of hate from other players, especially when you manage to get it somewhere useful. And then for number 3, we have the Smuggler Wing, which is a 4-ship fleet. They gain an additional warp, and this fleet can move into and through sectors containing rival ships. On the flip side, we have the Ragtag Fleet, which is 6. During your turn, there's a glare on there, sorry. In sectors where you can commission fleets, you may place ships from contraband on this fleet for free. You may use ships directly from contraband to build this fleet as a bonus fleet build. For each separate faction represented by this rolls an additional die in combat. If ships originally belonging to other fleets leave this fleet, they revert to their original owners. But it allows you to spend those contraband to put extra ships on here, and then they get additional attack die for every ship that you have on there that's not Orion, which is kind of cool. And the downside is they can't leave, so if they're the last 3, you want to make sure are yours, and these 3 up here can be your others, because if the fleet disbands and you drop down, anything extra either goes away or goes back to yours if they're Orion ships. So interesting. I definitely like that one, though the Smuggler Fleet is entertaining too. Ideally, you can use the Smuggler Fleet to get in position where you want to and make some interesting trouble for people behind their lines. It's worth noting they also gain a new ability during the command phase here. You have the normal move, hegemony, invade, space battle, launch projects, and commission a fleet, but you also gain the place a slave girl, where you can put a slave girl on a developed system that you orbit. It doesn't say that you have to control it too, so that's a key thing to keep in mind. Everything on the build page is the same. And for their advancements, they have a lot of very interesting and unique ones that are fitting to the faction. A lot of them involve having slave girls in the system, and you can exhaust them by tipping the model over to do various things. This one in particular, knockoffs, allows you to basically steal someone's advancement for a turn. You can use it as if it was your own until the end of the turn. Also things like booby traps that allow you to use your contraband ships to give bonuses to your rolls. This one in particular is kind of nifty. It allows you to use a command to drop any number of your ships and fleets at warp and exit warp and all move to the same sector as long as they can all reach it. This allows you to swarm an opponent. And some other interesting things in here. They're very aggressive, which you would expect, and remind me a lot of the Terran Empire, but with some sneaky tricks in there as well, thanks to the slave girls. And who isn't willing to accept a trade agreement to get free culture at the cost of getting one of these girls put on their system? So it's a trade-off there, based on what all advancements that they have researched already. Early on in the game, when they don't have much, that trade agreement's great. Getting the slave girls is not that big of a deal. Later on, after they've started researching these, you may come to regret that early advancement you're going to get from having the culture income. So it's worth keeping in mind. Overall, though, they're a pretty aggressive faction. They make their way around the board pretty easily using a combination of some of their advancements and some of their fleets. They can bypass rivals without needing permission, basically. The trade-off is their corruption penalty. Their rivals can bypass them as well without needing permission as long as they pay them off. So you have to keep that in mind. As I said early on, your trade agreements are sought after. Getting free culture every turn is a huge bonus. But if you're going to be giving that away, make sure that you're going to make use out of it by placing the slave girls with it and by researching your advancements so that you can make use of those slave girls once they're in play. Don't forget that during the command phase, you can also deploy slave girls. So if you're not using your trade agreement, you can still get them into play. But the big thing is to work on your research to build up those projects so that you can have those abilities and advancements to use to make use of them. One thing to keep in mind, though, as aggressive as a faction as they are, you are outnumbered. Most of your fleets are smaller than every other faction, so you have to keep that in mind. You're probably going to be outnumbered, you're probably going to be outgunned, so you want to focus on building up your weapons and shield. Of course, everybody else is going to do that too. And you want to put research into your advancements. So that's the downside to the faction, is that you're constantly research starved as you're debating, do you want to upgrade your weapons? Do you want to put more research into a new project? You constantly on the lookout for planets with research nodes so that you can boost your income. You want to get to those phenomena before the Federation do and get your research from those too. So there's a lot of scrounging for research with the Orions. Overall, though, I think they're a pretty fun faction to play and a nice addition to the collection. So, as with all the other fan-based factions, you can decide for yourself if it's something you want. But that's a look at the Orion fan-made faction for Star Trek Ascendancy. As always, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.